All right. Once again, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our GoFly webinar about the Phase 2 submission form and scoring rubric. Pleased once again to introduce founder and CEO of GoFly, Gwen Leiter.
Thank you, Nidhi. And thank you all for joining us today. We will review the GoFly Phase 2 submission as well as the scoring rubric. And to kick it off today for us, we're turning to Sky.
All right, thank you. So the topic of today's webinar is the GoFly Phase 2 submission. And I'll just start off with just putting things into perspective regarding the entire GoFly process. And we've already made it through the launch, and many of you participated in the Phase 1 part of the process. And today we're focusing on Phase 2, but I really wanted to pull this up to give some perspective and as a reminder that the fly-off is really the larger goal here, and to remember, even when you're working on Phase 2, to keep that fly-off in perspective, because the fly-off is really an order of magnitude bigger in every way than these prior phases, which are more about the process and the journey, and the fly-off is really your destination. So the Phase 2, if you're focused and doing good work and making good progress toward the fly-off, the Phase 2 should be a natural part of that journey for you. So the Phase 2, if you've read the rules thoroughly, this is the screenshot of the platform looking at the guidelines, this is all that's regarding the Phase 2, which is basically two parts, which is basically an update of your Phase 1 material. And if you didn't participate in Phase 1, then new Phase 1 material, of course. And then in addition to that, a little bit of proof that you've done a little bit with your device in the real world. And that's it in the rules. However, if you look at the Documents tab, that's where we get into what we're going to cover in the pretty short webinar today. And these are the three documents that we'll be looking at. So I would hope that most of you have at least glanced at these already. The submission form should look very familiar. It's very, very similar to the Phase 1 submission form. And then we'll go through the rubric and the checklist as well. So looking at the submission page, and hopefully this comes up and you can see this on my screen. Don't worry about reading the small print. So what we've posted on for you is basically a PDF printout of what the online submission form will look like. And I'm skipping down to section 3 because sections 1 and 2 are administrative and overhead and importantly aren't used for evaluating your submission by the judges. You definitely have to do it because it won't get in front of the judges unless you fill out sections 1 and 2. But we're starting with section 3. The technical design report is very similar to Phase 1. Again, you need to describe your device, why it is the way it is, what it can do. And we'll move straight on to section 4, which is one of the few sections that is a bit different. Basically, it's shorter. We're not asking as much. One of the purposes of section 4 is for you to be able to take little snippets of your design report and essentially copy paste them into other fields. And this was very helpful when we had many submissions for Phase 2. We're able to treat the design report more as the standalone document that it is and have the judges focus more on that. So section 4 is a bit shorter. And one of the only additions has been this control summary, item 4.4, that was simply because as a little reminder, this of course should be in your design report, but a reminder to make it very clear to the judges how your device is controlled. Commercial considerations, pretty much the same. Safety report, pretty much the same, and project execution, pretty much the same. But this is the new part, section 8, where you get to show that not only have you done good, thorough design and you've thought about it, but you've also demonstrated in the real world that you have some proof points that when you show up to the fly-off, you'll be able to complete the mission. And the emphasis in here is being able to complete the mission. Phase 1 and 2, these early phases, they aren't about they're about can you do it, not how well you can do it. It's that process of getting there. The how well you do it is entirely about the fly off, but these early phases are just about your process. Instead of going through each of these new bullets one by one, where basically you get a chance to upload a video as well as document, what were the conditions of that particular video that proves that, hey, this is good evidence that we will be able to get to the fly off, and with our final device will be able to do this. So the 3 required maneuvers in the rules, and then there's also a second section of part 8 that has to do with it, a little bit of content where once you've done those maneuvers, you have an opportunity to show if you've gone above and beyond to be able and validate some other aspects of your device. You can provide a little bit of evidence there. And so we'll pop straight over to the judging rubric. Hopefully this comes through. And this is very similar to the rubric that was used for phase 1. So again, like the first half of the phase 2 is pretty much just an update of your phase 1. So we'll just go through these items one by one. Now this rubric is the intended audience is the judges, but it should be helpful for you to read it as well. And it's available online as a PDF that you can read through and try and get an idea of, how are we asking the judges to assess your submission, which will help you put together a strong submission. So in the design report, just regarding the technical design and what it is, this is basically you need to clearly illustrate how it works, what the design is. Controllability was mentioned earlier, and things that would make you lose points here are as if the judges have questions in their mind after they're done reading your submission of, oh, I'm not quite sure how this part of their device works, or I'm not sure how this component is connected to this. The more question marks they have in their head around, what it is or how it works, that's what will lose you points in that section. Similarly, you need to make very clear what your device can do regarding every single GoFly requirement, and for this. We put together a checklist for the judges, but it's available to you as well. So this is the checklist, and the checklist is pretty much just pulling heading. This checklist was built by taking the rules document and deleting most of it. So it reads pretty much like the rules document for what you have to do with the fly off and the requirements the device has to meet. And the judges are going to read your submission and then go through this checklist and say, oh, actually, I don't know if they address that. And if they say, oh, I don't know if they address that, then that's what will lose points in the section regarding making the expected performance clear. It's really important to note that it's much better to address every aspect of all the requirements and how your device performs against them. Again, we're assessing your process here and not we're not assessing your expected score at the fly off or anything like this. So it's very important that if you've done a test and something isn't as you expected, it's really important to acknowledge that and say, hey, this wasn't how we expected. Here's our plan for how we're going to address that. That's how you can get the full points for making your expected performance clear rather than just ignoring it. So and then moving on to the justification, we want to make sure that when you're talking about what your design is, there are a few points here for the why it is the way it is. And so for sufficient reasoning about why you made certain design decisions. And then related to that, but also related to the expected performance, is substantiating these claims. So we want you to substantiate both your reasons in your justification, but also the majority of this will probably go to substantiating the expected performance, so that when you say the device can do X, that the judges believe it thoroughly. And then we get to a couple of sections regarding the innovations and enablers and the product mindset. That basically these sections are almost exclusively talking about the process, before and after the GoFly competition, to show that you've thought a little bit about the device as a product. Similarly with the safety drivers, and then the safety report, where this is a little bit of a rehash of the rules, where the rules require you to identify single point failures that can result in hazardous conditions. And basically the judges are instructed here to look at your design and then look at the hazards that you've identified and say, actually, I can't think of anything else. Looks like they're good. What will lose points here is that the judges are able to go in and say, oh, actually, there's this potential flaw that I don't think has been addressed. Then that's where this section comes in. And there is a mechanism in the judging process for judges to kind of bring up concerns, not just in this section, but in any section, to other judges. So it's not advisable to hope that the judges miss it, because even if 9 out of 10 judges don't notice something, it's that 10th one who is able. There's a mechanism for the judges making other judges aware of concerns like this. So definitely be thorough. The project execution feasibility, just talk about what you need to do, what are your risks, how you're managing them, and talking about, do you have the resources available to you to address those risks. And there are 10 points for the clarity of your submission. So first I'll start with a statement that everyone, even native English speakers, know somebody who's better at writing than they are. So definitely leverage that resource. This is not meant to be a gotcha on requiring perfect formatting, style, and grammar. The point of this is that the judges are instructed not to spend their time doing detective work on your submission. So similarly to in the technical report, if they have to do detective work to try to figure out how your device works, they don't have to. And if they're not, and similarly, we're not asking them to reread one sentence 5 times that's cryptic just to try to decipher it and what you mean. So if it isn't distracting, then most of you should get full points in this section. And if you're not getting full points in this section, that probably means that things communicated elsewhere aren't clear, and you'll be losing points in those sections as well. So I fully expect and hope that everybody will get full points for the clarity of their submissions. So moving on to the status and progress. This is in 2 sections. The lion's share of the points are for those maneuvers that were explicitly asked for in the rules, including the vertical or near vertical takeoff, followed by steady flight out of ground effect. Steady flight might be forward flight for you. It could be a steady hover. The aborted landing, and the vertical or near vertical landing. And this box that's highlighted is really the important part here, is that, one, you need the proof point that you've done this maneuver, and that will get you some points, but the majority of these 12 points for each of these areas is going to go to demonstrating that that maneuver you did is a good validation that your final device will be able to do it. So that means that supplemental document you upload needs to talk about, oh, did you do this at full weight? Did you do it at full scale? If not, have you accounted for similitude elements and things like this? So a really good test will get the majority or all of the points for these. And somewhat similarly, that we allow just a few points if you've been able to go above and beyond and demonstrate and validate some other aspects of your device. These don't necessarily explicitly need to be in flight. Obviously, it's nice if it is, but if it's a high fidelity simulation, for example, you should include that. You don't get a lot of space here. There aren't a lot of points, but definitely include what you have done. So if you believe there is some high risk element of your device that warranted some testing, please document it and tell us about it. So that's actually pretty much all I have. There was some discussion regarding the scale testing and the tethered testing. The keywords are similitude regarding, we want to make sure that you, I think most of us learn in college about, how to scale things for a wind tunnel. And there are other elements of similitude similar to that. So went through the checklist. And I just wanted to talk about, a few different types of similitudes, such as Reynolds number and Mach number. This, when you do wind tunnel testing with static models, this is what you learn about. Geometric similitude is basically if you are scaling something down by half, it should probably be half width and also half length and also half height. Less commonly taught is Froude similitude for dynamics, and also a good term to Google would be dynamic scaling, which is what you'll do if you're trying to make a scale model that a scale model of an airplane, for example, that has the same controllability and properties, and it will tell you not just how to scale it in size, but also the inertias, how fast rotors or propellers should spin, and the math of dynamic scaling will even tell you at what frame rate to film it, so that when you play it back full speed, it looks full scale. So that's all I have. Ready for some Q&A. Like I said, it would be a short webinar, and hopefully, between this and the documentation online, you have a really good idea of what it is you need to do, and you're making good progress toward the fly-off.
Thank you, Sky. Just a reminder to everyone, please use the Q&A button to submit your questions. Sky, the first question we have is, does the Phase 2 prototype, should it be the same prototype that will be used for the fly-off?
So one thing I forgot to mention is that in the section 8 of the scoring, it's worth 50 points. And one way to think about that is that if you have a full-scale device and you fly it through the entire flight profile, and you've made measurements that are similar to all the measurements that are being made at the fly-off, then that's the way to have a slam dunk full 50 points. That said, it's designed such that good, smart testing can result in the majority of the points. So if it's just a prototype and it's not your final device, there's a good chance that you can do really good tests with that prototype that will go a very long way toward validating the design and substantiating that it will be able to do what you claim it will be able to do.
Okay. Next question. Is there a limit to the scale of the model in order to get full marks, or does it have to be a full-scale model to get 100%?
It does not have to be it depends on what you're testing. So there are certain things that are very difficult to match with a scale model. So like I showed on that last slide about the different types of similitude, you can't really do all of those things at once. So there are certain things that you will be able to very believably validate with a very small scale model, and other things that will be very difficult to convince judges that your full scale device will be able to do it. So certain things like, if there's a structural test, for example, doing that at scale is not going to be as convincing as doing it at full scale. That said, if you have a material and you've done test coupons and then a very thorough simulation analysis of your full scale device, that goes a very long way and is very good, aerospace practice for validating that, hey, this thing is going to work the first time we try it. And so if you've convinced the judges that, hey, when we build our final fly-off device, it's going to work the first time, then that's will give you most or all marks for that section 8, those 50 points.
Okay. Next question: if any payload is added to the Phase 2 prototype, how will that affect the scoring?
So payload is. So the term payload is a bit tricky because some people will say only products can have payload because otherwise it's just a demonstrator or something like this. So I think that this question is more about adding weight in order for that prototype or for that scale device to be representative. And it is very representative when you're doing scale testing to have the device be at a representative weight. But payload in this case the only, for a personal flying device is a person. So depending on how you think about the word payload, that answer can change. But the important part here is to do your testing. The more, if you're able to do it at a representative weight, then that will be more representative of your final fly-off conditions.
Next question, Sky. Will FEA model simulations suffice?
So FEA models and simulation will suffice for certain types of validation. So like I mentioned with structural testing, you can take a structure and test it and measure it. You can even test it to failure. And this is something that's often done, not necessarily to failure, but it's very common to build up a nice FEA model of your device, understand the loads, apply those loads in FEA, and treat that as a validation that your structure is going to work. So FEA is a very good tool for structural analysis and validation. And so if that's what you're trying to substantiate, then FEA is a good tool.
Okay. Next question, Sky. How can we prove that safety was a design driver, or that we fulfill law requirements at our jurisdiction?
That's an interesting question regarding proving that safety is a design driver. I'm not can we table that one and defer that one to later?
Absolutely.
Let me write that down in terms of proving that safety is a design driver. I'd have to go back and look at it for sure, but I'm pretty sure we just asked for a discussion of how safety drove design decisions.
Okay, let's table that for now and we can come back to it, or we can answer it after the webinar is complete via an FAQ. Next question. Is a team ineligible to take part in the challenge if their vehicle size and noise levels are above the thresholds of 8.5 feet and 87 decibels?
So the important part, so if you remember the first slide I showed in terms of the journey, there was a flight readiness review in there. And so at the flight readiness review, you need to show that you've done some flying that's representative. I'll address the size item first, where one of the first things that will happen at the fly-off is your device will be measured. And if it violates the size constraint, then it will not be compliant and therefore not eligible for prizes. The second one was regarding noise, and the only time that noise will be measured is at the fly-off when you're flying. So violating noise is not a disqualifier for being able to go to the fly-off and fly. It's just that in the process of the fly-off, different aspects are measured and checked off at different times. And so the size one is checked off first, or one of the first things to be checked off. And so if that isn't compliant, then your device is not compliant with the rules.
Okay. And another question regarding the device. Does it need to be the same as described in the phase 1 report? So remember that there are some people who are starting phase 2 without having participated in phase 1. So there are no written rules about it needing to be the exact same device. Design is a very iterative process, and sometimes those iterations are not small tweaks. Sometimes those iterations are very large, and so that's just the nature of the evolution of design. So there's no explicit rule about that. Of course, if you just resubmit your exact phase 1 material, but all of your tests that you show and your videos are for a completely different thing, that's a problem. So if you've done many design changes and you participate in phase 1, and all those design changes should be integrated into new phase 1 material. And so you have a bit more work ahead of you, the more changes you made just in terms of putting together the phase 2 material. Okay. There's a question regarding the operator's weight. Is it the operator's weight that needs to be 200 pounds or more? What about the weight of the dummy operator for the UAV?
So the phrasing here is that anything that is not essential for the device to function can be part of the operator weight budget. And when I say device to function, that's with a human operator. And that should answer the question in terms of a human operator would stand on a scale and be 200 pounds, and same thing with the dummy for unmanned entries. And I think that should answer the question. If not, I'm sure it'll be typed in again.
And a follow-on question from the same person is that their helicopter's body is less than 8.5 feet, but the rotary wing is about 20 feet. Does that meet the requirements?
So I encourage looking at the webinar that was done, let's see, it's quite a while ago now, but on the rules specifically regarding the kind of the fly-off rules that really focused on, hey, what are you going to be asked to do at the fly-off? And anything that's continuously rotating or moving, basically that counts as the entire disc for the size measurement.
Okay. Another question is, will food be considered as a fuel resource?
We haven't thought about that.
Okay. Another question that we have coming in via the chat is that we have an innovator is concerned about the size requirements, and are they able to compete but just not receive any prizes? What are the other oversized teams doing?
I'm not sure there are oversized teams, and I think we'll defer this question to probably taking it offline.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I will speak up on this particularly. The Pratt and Whitney prize does not require compliance with all criteria. So for example, if you are larger in size criteria, then you would only be eligible for the Pratt and Whitney Innovation Prize.
Okay, so there's still an opportunity for you to participate if you are oversized.
In the final fly-off, yes, for that Pratt and Whitney Innovation Prize.
Thank you, Gwen. Sky, next question. Is there a division of the FAA that is qualified to provide the certificate of airmanship to a human-powered aircraft?
The relevant section of the Code of Federal, Chapter 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations is Part 61, I believe. And the airman, a certificated airman is independent from how the vehicle is propelled. So basically there's qualifying the pilot, and then there's qualifying qualifying the pilot for that particular item. But there's the standard FAA medical exam, but there's no, hey, are you fit enough to power a human-powered vehicle exam.
I would also advise all innovators that next week we have a master lecture with Earl Lawrence of the FAA. They will be providing a point person contact for all GoFly inquiries into the FAA, and I would encourage you all to listen to and join that master lecture.
Perfect. Good timing for that question.
Mm-hmm. We will be opening registration for that particular lecture on Monday, so you will find that link in your inbox. Next question, Sky, is regarding the nature of our propulsion system. We are not able to demonstrate our fuel reserve by mass fraction as proposed in the guidelines. Which method of demonstrating the energy reserve would you consider appropriate for electric propulsion?
So the easy way to do this, of course, is if your device does change weight as it uses energy. Just weighing it before and after is the most straightforward method. The rules are written such that alternative forms of powering your device are possible. One way to, for example, with an electric device to validate this is to show through measuring the power consumption of the device that in some loiter phase, you know what the power consumption is, and then being able to, after landing, be able to kind of drain your energy source at that same power level for the required reserve time. So kind of a detailed implementation would look something like measuring current out of a battery during flight, being able to show that the current and voltage were at a certain level during a representative loitering phase of flight, and then doing, say, a strap down test after landing, showing that there's enough energy to replicate that power level that was seen in flight for the required 10 minutes.
And next question is it allowed to fulfill the endurance requirement by loitering directly after the speed distance run?
So the flight profile is designed such that the specific maneuvers you're asked to do have enough time in between them that you aren't rushed to go from one segment of the demonstration to another. And so if you're not rushed between the speed run and your next maneuver, then you can take your time, and that time will count toward fulfilling the full endurance.
Next question, is it established in the law that all forms of aircraft require a license?
I'm not a lawyer or a politician, but I would point to Part 103. And so in the US, there is an area of recreational flying that doesn't require significant pilot requirements, but that's all I'm going to say about that.
Sky, would you like to go back to the question regarding safety as a design driver, or shall we address that after the webinar?
Let me see if I can find a very specific part of the submission page, and I can come back to that.
That is all the questions we have.
Okay, perfect. Well, so we're looking at section 5.3, safety-driven design, and we're just asking to describe up to 3 of important aspects of your concept, or even things that could be applied to it once it's productized that impact safety or were driven by making the concept adequately safe. Either, and this could be real safety or perceived safety for market reasons and things like this. So we're not asking for proof in this area. We're asking for a reasoned discussion.
Okay. Another question that we have is, do I need to provide video of all of my tests?
I think it's a good idea to record all of your testing for your own purposes. So you never know when something is going to go wrong, or surprisingly right for that matter. And it's very useful to be able to go back and look at a video in slow motion to really understand what happened. So it's just a good idea, and video recording equipment is extremely accessible these days. So it is strongly encouraged. It's not, video is not a required part of validating everything that you do. We do require it for those 3 maneuvers that are mentioned in the rules, however. And they're just 90-second videos. We're not looking for high production value. 90 seconds is plenty for those very short maneuvers to show that you did it, and even to show you did it from multiple angles. And we're just looking for proof that you did it, and video is a very easy, low-cost way to dispel any questions, regarding was the maneuver actually done.
And how thoroughly do I need to describe the test articles?
So it can be, at one end of the spectrum, it could be, this test article is exactly the same device that we're planning to bring to the fly-off, and it's exactly as we described in our design report, and it's at, these are the conditions where the test was done. regarding, say, altitude, device weight, things like this. Otherwise, if it's something where you said, oh, our device had this in place to because we haven't built this part yet, or we're doing it at scale. So here's our quick analysis showing that all the rotors were spinning at the correct scale speed, and that we were at the correct scale weights, for example. Those things need to be included to be able to convince the judges that again, you're just trying to show them that the design and the device that you described earlier in the submission that you plan to bring to the fly-off is going to be able to do that maneuver. And so depending on the conditions of the testing and the accommodations you've made to make the test happen, just record those so that the judges have a good idea of how representative the test is.
And if we are getting computer logs from the onboard equipment, would that count as proof of our maneuvers?
We specifically asked for a video.
Having a VTOL fit in a cube, other question. Will proof of manned flight weigh more heavily than unmanned flight in the phase 2 selection process?
No.
Should we finish the certification before the fly-off competition or meet the FAA regulation? Or if we don't meet the FAA regulation, is it eligible to participate in the fly-off?
That is not, that's basically not determined quite yet. You should plan in the worst case to be able to be compliant to fly in US airspace for the fly-off. And GoFly is working hard to reduce that burden as much as it can for you for the fly-off itself.
Do I need to show correlation between predictions and test results?
So that's pretty much the core of the substantiation element of the section, basically the design report and the section 8 regarding the maneuvers. But really, in the design report, if you have an aspect of your device that you say, hey, it will do X, and our test showed X, that is substantiation. If you claim, hey, it will do X, and the test showed Y, then that is something that it's okay, it happens. You can acknowledge it and say, and depending on what it is, if it means that that you won't make it, then you'll have to talk about things that you're going to change in order to be able to be compliant. If it just means that, oh, it was, a little bit, we built the structure and it was a little bit heavier than we expected, so we'll have to be extra careful with weight. This is, like I said, design is very iterative, and so you'll design, you'll build, you'll test something, you'll find out you'll need to redesign, and at the snapshot in time when you submit your phase 2, you may be anywhere in that cycle, and let's call it a convergence cycle. And so if there's some discrepancies are to be expected if you've found new information that requires a redesign. So we and the judges, of course, understand the realities of how development goes.
Okay. How safe is safe? Can there be too much safety in the aircraft design?
I'll just refer that one to the rules and how safety is addressed in the rules for the GoFly prize specifically. Will
the videos be released?
No. So there's a whole privacy policy. Anything that's in the phase 2 submission that is publicly releasable is very explicitly stated as publicly releasable, and the only items there would be in sections 1 and 2.
Okay. Should tests be limited to a single aspect being tested, measured, proven?
In some cases, that's the best way to go. In some cases, it isn't. And one of the things that your test could be addressing is regarding the integration and making multiple things happen at the same time. So if that's what you're trying to test, then you need those multiple things at the same time. If you're trying to test something else, then doing tests in isolation could be the faster, less expensive, smarter way to go. It just depends.
Do you have any suggestions on how to get advice on safety procedures for testing?
I don't have any advice at the moment. I'm certain that there's probably some very good, documents, articles, or even advisory circulars out there, but I don't know any off the top of my head.
Can the flights in the videos use special means like off-board tethered power?
So for this phase 2 testing, we explicitly say that tethered testing is okay. Regarding this is more regarding a safety tether. If it's tethered power, then one aspect of your device that you are not substantiating is the powertrain, for example. So if the goal of that test is to substantiate other things, that's fine. But if you're trying to substantiate your powertrain, then judges will notice that it's not a representative test in that regard.
Do the videos have to be 90 seconds if I can show adequate evidence in a shorter video?
No, the 90 seconds is the maximum. And if the full maneuver takes significantly less than that, and you feel that you've proved that you've done it in significantly less than that, then much less is perfectly acceptable.
Can we enter with more than one entry? Can one entry win more than one prize, like the most compliant and the smallest?
So the first question I will defer to Gwen Leiter, and the second one the answer is yes. It is possible for one entry to win multiple prizes, just in terms of the way the math of the prizes works. It could be that the device that wins the quietest prize is also has the best overall score and would win the grand prize as well, for example. And then Gwen, do you want to talk about the first question? Do you have an answer for that?
Teams can submit more than one entry.
Okay.
You keep saying maneuver. Are you referring to a specific maneuver?
So if you look at the rules on the platform, so the guidelines, the phase 2 pulls out. Actually, I basically did the screenshot early on in the presentation, where the second part of the section 1.4 of the rules talks about this phase 2 submission deadline, and says at that deadline you need to submit proof that you've done basically those 3 specific maneuvers, which are the takeoff, aborted landing, and landing. So that's what I'm referring to primarily when I'm talking about the kind of the maneuvers in a phase 2 context.
Do you have a sense of how many teams are projected to be invited to phase 3?
I don't have a sense. And I don't know if maybe Gwen, if you have statistics on registrations or anything like that, and you want to say anything about it.
Right now, we are solely focused on phase 2, and at the start of phase 3, at the start of phase 3, we'll be releasing more information on that.
Right. Section 1.5 of the rules addresses a little bit in terms of do a good phase 2, and then you're on your way to the fly off. But yeah, like Gwen said, we're focused on in terms of logistics and things like that. Phase 2 is the focus right now.
After phase 2 awards, would you consider publicity for all phase 2 submittals to help with fundraising?
Gwen?
So we have active fundraising help that actually I will speak about right after these questions are answered. And we work with teams on a variety of different fundraising methods, and we'll continue to do that as part of our mentoring, our mastering, and our GoFly benefits. And I'll address that shortly.
Okay, great. If we submit proof of the 3 maneuvers, are you guaranteed or likely to move on to phase 3?
So I'll read section, let's see, let me pull it up here. Section 1.5 of the rules. So you need to be able to meet all the requirements of phase 2. And when we talk about requirements, we're talking about, this is different from the fly-off requirements, if that makes sense. So if you've submitted all your phase 2 material and it's all proper and you've met all the rules and you've been compliant with all the other GoFly guidelines, then you can expect it to be able to go onto the fly-off. So as long as you are dotting your I's and crossing your T's and following all the agreements, and when we say the fly-off, remember one thing that I think hasn't gotten a lot of focus today is that there is the flight readiness review, which is an additional hurdle before you can come to the fly-off that requires a certain amount of prior flight, for example. And the flight readiness review is also an area where you'll have to convince that you will be able to go to the fly-off and not put other people in harm's way, for example. So don't forget about the flight readiness review as well.
So just following up on that then, will phase 3 still be on an invitation?
So I'll just read the exact text of section 1.5. GoFly will issue invitations to the final fly-off based upon teams meeting phase 2 submission requirements. And like I said, requirements are regarding the phase 2, not the fly-off requirements. Fly-off document requirements, so get all your documentation order, and adherence to all GoFly agreements and rules. So there are, of course, many agreements. Of course, you are expected to have read and understood all of them and comply with all of them. And then at the end of section 1.5, there's a reminder that there are pre-fly-off requirements such as the prior flight minimums and the flight readiness review.
So that is all of the questions that we have right now.
Okay. Well, let's hand it over to Gwen so you can talk about those other upcoming things.
Well, thank you, Sky. So just a few points. As posted previously, for these phase 2 submissions, neither scores nor ranking will be provided. However, all phase 2 submissions will be working with reviewers to receive feedback. So too, we have a variety of mentors available to work with each phase 2 team on a one-on-one basis. To ask for a mentor, you simply need to fill out the mentor request form in the Documents tab of the website. Right now, we have phase 2 teams working with one mentor. We also have teams working with around 10 mentors. So we have the ability to help you and provide mentors with expertise to you should you want to take advantage of that. Mentors are on a first come, first served basis. So should you have a need, please fill out that form. So too, GoFly offers a number of benefits to phase 2 teams. Those benefits are listed on the benefits tab of the phase 2 website, and it shows exactly how to access them. So in addition to low cost insurance, there's free CAD software and free CFD simulation software and free safety consultations with BRS Aerospace, as well as free custom case renderings and discounted composites and discounted actuators and a whole host of other products. Also, GoFly is offering free membership at the Vertical Flight Society and the AOPA, as well as discounted membership at DAA and FFF. So there are a whole host of benefits to help you, and we would encourage you to take advantage of those benefits should you desire. through the benefits tab on the Phase 2 website. So too, GoFly will continue to be offering master lectures to all of our teams. Right now, those lectures are open to all teams, but they will shortly be available only to Phase 2 teams. We have a number of lectures. Actually, it's been about one a week recently, and a number coming up as well. We mentioned the lecture with the FAA. We also have one with the Associate Administrator of NASA coming up. We have a number of different funding and fundraising lectures, as well as safety and technology lectures. And so I would encourage you all to participate in and listen to those lectures. On to funding, which was a question that was specifically asked here. GoFly next week will be providing a list of interested investors to all Phase 2 teams. GoFly has been actively engaging with a number of VC firms, private equity firms, high net worth individuals, and speaking with them and educating them on GoFly. And we have prepared a list because everyone on this list has engaged with discussions with GoFly and is interested in speaking to, meeting with, and potentially funding GoFly teams. Now, there's no guarantee of funding, of course, but everyone on the list that will be released next week has raised their hand and said, yes, they want to engage with GoFly teams and potentially fund them. So that will be available. So too, we continue to have master lectures on funding. We will have a number coming up about pitching, about putting together your pitch deck, and other aspects of funding. In addition, besides traditional investor funding and VC funding, GoFly is here to help you to bring on sponsors. GoFly is also here to help you in terms of crowdfunding, and we have the technology lead at Kickstarter able to mentor you and help you should you decide to do a Kickstarter campaign. So there are a variety of ways between VCs and private equity firms and sponsorships and crowdfunding that GoFly is happy to help all of our Phase 2 teams in order for them to raise their needed funds. We spoke about reviewers, and I would encourage all Phase 2 teams to not only access the mentors, but to speak with reviewers about their Phase 1 submissions, have they not thus far. We will continue to utilize reviewers throughout the rest of the GoFly prize. And then as a final point, Phase 2 registration documents are due December 8th. There are several different documents: the master team agreement, the media rights agreement, the company questionnaire, and the participant equity agreement. I would encourage you all to start those documents as soon as possible. One cannot access those Phase 2 benefits until you have begun the process and have given us the evidence of your corporate formation. And then, of course, insurance is the final aspect of Phase 2 onboarding. As stated, the deadline is December 8th, and it will take you a little bit of time to get through all of these. And so we would encourage you to start sooner rather than later. And certainly it is in your best interest, should you be interested in participating in Phase 2, to start as soon as possible in order to access those GoFly benefits. And that is it for the moment. Should you have additional questions regarding this webinar or any other aspects of GoFly and Phase 2, do not hesitate to reach out to us at either info@goflyprize.com or phase2@goflyprize.com, and we will be happy to answer any and all questions that you may have. We appreciate you all joining us today and look forward to watching you change the world. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.